let me introduce you to a Canoness with a power sword who on average will kill Rebute GUILLIMAN in a single round of combat. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about a fun and fighty Sisters of Battle Canoness build who can put out a ridiculous amount of damage on the charge. Honestly, I'm not sure if she's the most practical option to use competitively, but it's always quite fun to see a very cheap and slightly underwhelming character punch far, far above its weight. So let's see how she might be able to achieve that. So here's the setup for the all-destroying Canoness of Doom then. We start out with a normal 50-point Sisters of Battle Canoness, not particularly overwhelming stats wise. She's a measly strength of 3 and has 4 attacks base, but of course we can make that far, far better. First up, she can take a power sword for an extra 5 points, that'll get her to strength 4, AP minus 3, and for this setup she's going to be in the Order of Arm-Artered Lady, using a relic combo from that supplement, the one that came out in Warzone Charadon 2, the Book of Fire. The Arm-Artered Lady trait doesn't really do anything for the combo, though she might have a few more miracle dice to play around with, as you generate them quite easily when any of your own units die. To get the absolute max out of her, we're going to use the Exploding Sixes in Melee Sacred Rite. I know that is locking you into a fairly big army-wide decision, but if you're using a fair amount of melee sisters in the game, then I think it is one of the best ones to pick. You don't necessarily have to use this one, but it does add a little bit more damage. From there we can take 2 warlord traits on the same model, which you can do with a stratagem in the new codex. First up, she takes Righteous Rage, the really big melee buffing one out of the core codex, and that gives her the fairly crazy combo of re-rolling all hits and wounds in melee. It is the one that Val normally takes, and that's maybe one of the reasons why there are big trade-offs to using this, as it means that you wouldn't be able to use Val in the same army. In any case, we combine that with Martyr's Strength, one that's potentially usually fairly weak, which is the one where each lost wound on the model gives you +1 strength and +1 attack to a maximum of +2 of each. It means that if this Canoness were to lose 2 wounds, then she'd be jumping up to a big strength of 6 with that power sword, and getting up to 6 attacks base as well. Fortunately though, there's a very easy way to set that up. She can use the Blade of Sacrifice relic, which is another one from the codex, and it combos amazingly well. It still has the exact same stats as a normal power sword, +1 strength, AP minus 3, and damage 1. But before you fight in the fight phase with this model, you can choose to sacrifice some of her remaining health, either 1 or 2 wounds, and if you do sacrifice 2 of her wounds, then she gets the incredibly powerful benefit of every successful wound roll she gets on the enemy, they take a big 2 mortal wounds instead of doing any normal damage. Combined with the extra attacks, boosted strength up to strength 6, and 4 rerolls to wound in the fight phase, this means that she is going to be getting a lot of wounds on the enemy. So how much damage can this super fighty Canoness do then? She's got 6 attacks hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s and getting exploding 6s for an extra hit, which actually means she's usually going to be landing 7 hits on average. Then she'll be hitting at strength 6 and re-rolling the wound roll, and every successful wound roll on the enemy will deal 2 mortal wounds. Against light hordes, that's going to be around 14 mortal wounds on say some toughness 3 guardsmen, around 12 mortal wounds on intercessors or aggressors, perhaps most hilariously of all, just upward of 10 mortal wounds on Rebute GUILLIMAN himself, so on average killing him in a single round of combat. Definitely really strong on anything that's got a really high invul save, though of course he would have a 50-50 chance to get straight back up afterwards, provided someone hasn't put him down already in the battle once before. In any case, I think it's quite funny that a 55-point Canoness with a Death Wish could somehow manage to down a Primarch. The only things that she maybe doesn't do excessive damage to are anything that's toughness 7 or 8, and she's only going to land around about half her wounds on them. Against those sort of hard targets, she'll be still averaging a fairly respectable 8 mortal wounds. That's still nice though, depending on what target it is. Potentially there's a few more things that you could do to make her even stronger as well. Firstly, you would have to think about a delivery mechanism. Jumping out of a Rhino seems like a reasonable option, maybe alongside some Repentia, or maybe even some Sacrosancts to help keep her safe with the bodyguard rule. If she needs to make a critical charge, making it automatically with a miracle dice is also a decent option. Otherwise, there are a few other minor buffs that you could potentially put on her to make her even stronger. Having a 25-point priest around to cast War Hymn on her could give her 1 extra attack. That'd put her up to just north of 8 hits. And potentially, if you had a Dogmata or Imagifier, you could use them to give her specifically exploding 6s on the charge if she didn't already have it. She isn't all that durable when she's on the front line, so she's at quite a high risk of getting killed in return. Particularly she'd be sapping some of her own wounds to fuel the blade, but I guess theoretically you could put some wounds back on her with a Hospitaller. Or actually that Emperor's Grace Blessings of the Faithful could actually be quite a good fit as well. That's the one that allows her to heal D3 wounds per turn, so has a pretty good chance of counteracting any self-inflicted damage that she takes from the sword. It's not really excessive either, that would only put her up to 75 points. Otherwise, if she's fighting Psychers, she can get +1 to wound against them. Really quite solid if she finds herself going toe-to-toe with Magnus or Mortarion or Bellicor. If she dies, you could use 2 command points for Divine Intervention. That means that she won't die and be set up at the end of the phase. And then maybe if you had the Emperor's Grace Blessing on the go, you could even heal her a few wounds, so she could even use her sword to full effect in the next turn. Finally, if you just need literally every iota of damage out of her, you could maybe use a 5 or 6 of a Miracle Dice to auto-pass a wound roll against a hard target and guarantee some extra mortal wounds through. So there are plenty of options with this excessively choppy Canoness, and she certainly seems like a powerful tool if you are using Armated Lady and not using Varl. However, to do both the things you are giving up other options, and it might not necessarily make your army miles stronger overall. If she doesn't have the reroll wounds warlord trait, then she is significantly less useful against a lot of things, and I'm just not sure that she's quite worth it if she doesn't get to put those very reliable wounds through. Varl is certainly one of the strongest Sisters units in the Codex, and it's a real shame not to have her on the board. If she is on the board, then she needs to be your warlord, and that means that this Canoness won't be able to use that trait. It also means that you need at least 1 detachment of the Order of Armated Lady, which might not be the worst thing in the world. Maybe you could have a patrol of them or something alongside some Bloody Rose, then you'd still be making great use of the Exploding Six's Sacred Rite, but it does make army construction just that little bit more annoying. Next, as we mentioned, she is a fairly fragile character that hurts herself for 2 wounds every time she fights. There is a very good chance that she's going to be a one-hit wonder, though that one hit does have a really good chance of paying back her points investment then and there. Finally, I will bear in mind that you're also trading off other options for warlord traits and relics by taking her. For the sheer damage, I think the 2 warlord traits and the relic are worth it, but you bear in mind that you are paying a bit of a cost in addition to those very cheap points. Overall though, I think it's really quite a fun little build for a Canoness, maybe something from the Sisters army to answer those incredibly fighty Drukhari characters that are a pretty crazy bunch of melee monsters for their points as well. Let me know what you think of the combo down in the comments below, and please let me know if there's any details or subtleties that I might have missed. I'll post any obvious corrections in a pinned comment if there's anything I've got wrong. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, including plenty more for the Sisters, I'm sure. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all the videos does take an enormous amount of time and effort, and if you are enjoying regularly, any support is really greatly appreciated. I do try and put out some good incentives for people on the Patreon page. They include unique Discord roles, seeing videos early each week, including a preview of the Sisters of Battle tier list that's going to be coming out soon, and automatic entry into the prize giveaways each month with a chance to win some really big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.